In continuation of our review of the criticisms directed at the Quran by its opponents, we reach a series of critiques concerning the alleged disregard for women's dignity and an instrumental view of them. Several instances are cited for this claim, including that the Quran allows men to take multiple wives, permits marriage with underage girls, allows seeking pleasure from married female captives, or describes women as tilth, fields for men. These are examples cited as evidence of an instrumental view of women in the Quran. We must see whether the Quran actually presents such matters, or if what is claimed in the name of the Quran are misunderstood perceptions and incorrect famous beliefs that have become entrenched among Muslims. We must examine the Quran itself with precision and impartiality to reach a conclusion. In this segment, we examine two examples of these criticisms: the issue of polygamy and the issue of child marriage. The first question is, has the Quran allowed or encouraged men to take up to 4 wives? The basis for this statement and this famous fatwa is the 3rd verse of Surah An-Nisa, which says, marry 2, 3, or 4. However, unfortunately, this verse is often not read carefully from beginning to end, and its main message is ignored. Read this verse carefully from the beginning once. The verse starts with the subject of caring for orphans. When we read the verse accurately, we realize that the subject of this verse is not polygamy at all. The subject of the verse is a social responsibility that members of the Islamic society have toward orphans who must be cared for. The verse says, if you cannot properly fulfill your responsibility toward orphans, fulfill this duty even if it requires marrying multiple wives, but ensure this responsibility is carried out. Does this not mean that the Quran presents polygamy as an emergency measure under specific circumstances? More importantly, you see that immediately in this same verse, right after mentioning that you should even act this way to fulfill this responsibility, the Quran warns, if this action of yours leads to ignoring and violating the rights of women, you must not do it and should not take more than 1 wife. Does this not mean that the Quran places the principle on monogamy and presents polygamy as an exception and in emergency conditions? At the end of the verse, you again see an expression regarding monogamy, the more precise meaning of which is, if you have 1 wife, it is closer to ensuring you do not practice dominance, injustice, or oppression. As we also see in another verse, the Quran declares that establishing justice between multiple wives is truly difficult, if not impossible. Does this not show that the Quran confronts those who want to promote polygamy under the pretext of justice, declaring that such justice is not possible? Therefore, the principle is monogamy, and polygamy should only be pursued in specific circumstances to fulfill social duties and responsibilities. More importantly, the Quran views marriage as a human covenant and a mutual commitment. The Quran says you must remain faithful and committed to this covenant you have with your spouse. Fulfillment of promises is always presented in the Quran as a prominent and vital principle. Can someone who promised their spouse at the time of marriage not to betray them or take another wife betray their commitment and oath under the pretext that the Quran mentioned polygamy? Regarding the issue of child marriage as well, there is a verse in the Quran concerning the matter of divorce. A phrase appears there which has been interpreted to mean that the Quran specifies a waiting period, iddah, for children who have not yet reached menstruation. This very point is cited as evidence to claim that marrying an immature girl is permissible according to the Quran. But why is it not noticed that the Quran in other verses has declared the conditions for marriage to be maturity and physical and intellectual capability? With such a perspective, can we attribute to the Quran the permission to marry a child who does not yet have the power of discernment? Especially since this book views marriage as a conscious choice, a commitment, and a deep bond for building society and human development. Is it not time for us to set aside famous traditions, refer to the Quran itself, and pay attention to the cultural and environmental context in which the verses were revealed? Is it not time to emphasize the main goals of the Quran and strive for a more humane interpretation of this moral and spiritual book?